Hello, I welcome you to another moment on Indigenous Hands, the Indigenous Voices. Last week, I started a series tagged Learn from Your Indigenous Deaf Signers. And we looked at the story of Aisha, who became deaf at 10 years of age because she fell when she went to climb with her mates. And we saw how Aisha narrated her story, what happened after that. She was taken to the hospital and was given injection. She didn't get better and she was taken to the herbalist where she was given herbal medications. And eventually she became deaf. And so we saw other ways that she told us about herself. She wasn't able to go to school. And because possibly the parents were not educated, possibly they didn't value it, or possibly it was part of those stories that we often see in the deaf communities where parents feel that my child is deaf, not gonna be able to go to school anymore. So today we are continuing in looking at Aisha's story, and today I'm gonna be taking you through how Aisha was able to narrate her story in her Indigenous Sign Language. And so we're going to be looking at a few things regarding how she told her story. We're going to delve a little bit into some linguistic features, some linguistic terminology with which we analyze sign language. I know it is not going to be that strange to you because if you've been following our work here, you should be a little bit familiar with some of the terms that we use. And for those that are currently taking our class on African linguistics and interpreting, I know that you have as well almost become linguists. All right, so today we're going to be looking at from Aisha's story how she was able to narrate it. I'm going to be eliciting some features that enabled Aisha to tell her story. And why I'm doing this today is to show how much the Indigenous Sign Languages have the capacity of being analyzed linguistically. I want to show that our Indigenous Sign Languages may be limited in some aspects of discourse, but not in others. For Aisha was able to tell us a story without having to mix it up with any foreign sign language, and that is a fascinating thing. And so from her story we're going to be looking at a few things. We're going to be looking at the handshapes that were used, movements that she made. We will look at her palm orientation. We'll look at her locations where she pointed in the body or in the free space. And we'll also look at the non-manual signing features that she used. And on the non-manual signing features, we're going to be looking at facial expression, which is part of the gestures, mouthing, if there was any, and then some vocal sounds, which of course, if you listen to the video, you will hear some vocal sounds. And so all these are the parameters that we generally use when we are talking about, when we are describing sign language. And this came about, like many of you who watch my program know, that this came about when sign languages were regarded as language and they started getting the heat of linguistic study like spoken languages do get. And we know historically that the first sign language that became scrutinized at that level is American Sign Language, and that has given the sign language enough impetus to penetrate and expand into every hinterland, into every community, because of the level of study that has been done on American Sign Language that is still going on till today. So we know that the more we study our languages, the more we give the languages the opportunity to develop and to grow. Okay, so we're gonna play Aisha's video and we're gonna be looking at it segment by segment and see how much we can take out of what she narrated and how she narrated her story. I must warn you, I am not a signer of Margajingere sign language, and I'm going to be making my analysis based on my general knowledge of sign languages, and I'm going to be picking some features. So if I get anything wrong, if you are a Margajingere deaf signer or so, please you send your correction to us. But I know, having been studying this sign language for a while now, I am able to pick a whole lot of stuff from Aisha's story and talk about it in this program. So Aisha began her story by talking about the concept of time. And you see, she signed time, which is usually often the general sign for time. So the concept of time is often signed in many sign languages. This is one of the signs that one could say is universal. So she signed when here, meaning time. So she said, when I was 10 years old. And if I go to look at this according to the sequence that she signed, you are going to be getting something like time, I was born, child, grow, years, 10. That is a sequence of her signing, and which means when I was 10 years old, that's the whole sequence that she signed there. And then followed by a nod. And that nod was a nod like seeking approval, like, hope you understood what I'm saying. Yes. All right. And so she continued to sign age, year, 10. Child, grow or growing. And that means that she referred to the year that it happened, which was when she was 10 years old. So this is 10 in Margajingere sign language, and also some other indigenous sign languages that we have been looking at. For this community, this is 10. So the handshake for year, which is signed this way, is showing the year that she fell, the year that the event happened, which was year 10. And before that, she demonstrated in her signing the act of giving birth in the language, the act of giving birth. So that is the spread hands, and palm orientation is facing downward, giving the motion of birth, like a forceful release of something downward. And after that, the hand shape for child, which is also the B hand shape facing downwards, and child growing, year 10. This completes a sequence of an event. And each of these Aisha picked different handshapes that brings to bear what she wanted to communicate to us. It seems that each of the handshapes comes into some kind of milestone. For instance, she started by saying time and I, and the next sequence was born, and after which child, growing up, and year 10. Now, putting all this together to be translated into English when I was born and as I was 10 years old, that has formed a sequence or a string of expressions, which is more than a simple sentence. And without knowing the structure of English language or even knowing the structure of her language by education, Aisha knows how to craft her story. Now, I have not completely studied the syntax of this language to know if she automatically followed the syntax of the language, but I don't need to do that, because if she was able to organize her thoughts in these words and these words in the sentences and in the sentences that strike a meaning, that means she is communicating. And for the fact that she transmitted her thoughts with these expressions using her hands, forming the movements and the shapes and orientations, in addition to the facial expressions, she is being expressive. And that is what is important. And this string alone, if we want to put it under different linguistic analysis, this string alone can derive different sorts of analysis based on whatever angle a person wants to take it. You might want to take it based on the words or the sign segments that form the strings, or based on how they are put together sequentially, or based on the meaning they form eventually. Whichever way you are making a linguistic analysis of a language. And what stands out to us in this discussion today is that the language variety that she is using is capable of taking this analysis, is capable of taking this scrutiny, and it withstands it. Let us go back to see the next sequence that she showed us in her narrative. So in the next sequence, Aisha was able to tell us that she, with other hearing children, of course, those at her age, and they came together and they decided to go climb a wide plain. And they climbed. So we can kind of translate it in this structure. With other hearing together and climbing very wide children and high plain, or maybe hill, there was a fall. That means I fell, lost consciousness. And that is the second string that we want to look at in this discussion today. The handshape that signifies coming together with other hearing children of her age, and the handshape that suggests a climbing, and the handshape that suggests they climbed a high wide plain, and the handshape that suggested a fall. These are major handshapes that can be elicited from Aisha's story. First of all, the sign for hearing, signifying that at the time when this happened, that she wasn't deaf, neither were the children that followed her. They were not deaf. And they came together, and when they came together, they decided to go climbing. And when they did climb on the white plain, Aisha fell. Now, if we didn't put any verb, finite verb, or any other expletive to make this form a natural sentence, like we added is and was to it, which of course sign languages do not always add all those linguistic elements to make the meaning that the signer wants to make. Aisha was able to tell her story with the combination of her handshapes, the movements, and additionally the grammatical expressions that come through the facial expressions. So let us go back to look at this string again. Aisha started by signing children, children, like other children that are hearing. They came together, and we went ahead to climb. And we climbed a wide plain. Like I mentioned, Aisha did not attend school. That's what her story told us. So she does not understand, except by language contact, any other sign language than the one that she is using. But she is signing a sign that we can identify, that we may have as well identified in the school sign. And Aisha was signing in Margajingere Sign Language, not in American Sign Language, not in British Sign Language, not in any other sign language that you think is used in education, is used in scientific discourse or anything. Aisha used her language in a discourse that makes a complete meaning, that carries a complete weight of meaning and cultural expression. That is very spectacular. So to conclude on today's segment of discussion of Aisha's narrative skills or Aisha's storytelling skills and her signing skills, I want to go back to the handshapes that we elicited in the segments that we looked at. I would say that this part of our story featured a lot of B handshape or the open handshape. Also featured a lot of palm orientation, palm facing down. But dwelling on the handshape, much of her story showed us a lot of the open hand shape. And this can be found when she signed born, was born. And this was the open handship. And also we found the open handshake when she signed children, children. She signed open handshake in climbing, climbing. Another time we saw her sign with open handshake when she talked about coming together, come together. And in many open handshake, these handshapes are giving us different orientations and different movements, but we are tracing at this time the open handshake. Another handshake that features not as much as the open handshake is also the closed handshake. The closed handshake is only, if I'm not wrong, seen in Aisha's expression when she signed 10. In fact, this is not completely a closed handshake. This is regarded as the grappolo or the O handshake. So bring it together, she signed 10. And the next time we saw her sign with a closed handshake is in this word that I'm yet to figure out what it means. These are two instances that we saw Aisha sign with a closed handshake. Much of her signing in the segment we discussed today featured the open handshake. And we will continue to elicit Aisha's signing skills and storytelling skills, looking at the hand shapes, the movement, and other features of sign language in the next week. And so we will continue to elicit Aisha's signing skills as we go on in this series. So today we looked at how Aisha told her story, eliciting the hand shape. So this is the indigenous hands, the indigenous voices. And in the next week, we're also going to be looking at Aisha again and her story and see what we can learn. Please send us your questions and your comments, especially concerning this segment of study we are doing. I know it might sound a little bit technical to some. I would like to break it down as much as I can, speaking more to the non-signers and to the laymen than to professional linguists and signers. So I'm gonna see you again here next week. Until then, please continue to watch our videos and share them to those that you know that is gonna that they will benefit. Please subscribe to our channel and like this particular video. I will see you next week. Bye bye.